Thank you again for joining us this morning, especially our esteemed speakers, 4 of them, and also audience out there. Thank you for watching us on Friday. It's a weekend in Kedah. This is the first webinar organized by the Academy of Professors, Malaysia, under the Cluster of Education and Human Development. I'm Rosna Awang Hashim, the head of Cluster Education and Human Development, Academy of Professors, Malaysia, and also from School of Education and Modern Languages, University of Utara, Malaysia. Our webinar today will focus on managing quality in higher education in times of crisis. As we all know, we are really in a time of crisis, especially when it comes to teaching and learning. People are referring today what we are experiencing as ERT, emergency remote teaching, when teaching is not properly planned as expected due to time constraint, but teaching is done in order to give access to students to learn the best possible way that they can, because some of them may not have access to the internet. So that's why we call it emergency remote teaching. It can be ODL, it can be by mail, courier, whatever ways of achieving learning. That is what remote teaching is all about. As we know, the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic is prompting all schools and universities to abruptly adopt remote learning in place of face-to-face classes. Well, for some, this is completely new normal, but for few of them, is common, perhaps, but not in a complete remote teaching. However, we are used to blended learning, perhaps, but not fully online or remote teaching or this one. So that has caused a challenge for us. That's why today we are here to deliberate on issues in quality in higher education. With this pandemic, with this remote learning, how can we ensure that quality is not compromised? To discuss this further, we are pleased today to bring 4 esteemed speakers from MQA and also some professional bodies or accrediting bodies to discuss further on way forward, because we don't know how long this pandemic will go on. As far as I know, perhaps the online teaching, the fully online teaching, may have to continue until December or perhaps early next year. So how should we be prepared, especially the program honors and also the faculty members? How can we prepare ourselves to face this in future if this pandemic prolongs? Let me introduce our panelists today. Our first panelist is Professor Dr. Khairul Saleh Muhammad Sahari. Please wave, Prof. Khairul. Salam, thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, the Deputy CEO of Malaysian Qualification Agencies. He is responsible for all the quality assurance activities of the agency. Welcome, Prof. Khairul. Our second speaker is Professor Syed Ahmad Iskandar Syed Arifin, the Executive Director of Institute Sultan Iskandar, a research and consultancy company wholly owned by UTM, focusing on built environment and sustainability. Currently, he's a senior member of the Majlis Akreditasi dan Pendidikan Seni Bina Malaysia, or MAPS. That is a council set by Lembaga Arkitek Malaysia to oversee architectural and design interior design education. Welcome, Prof. Said. Thank you for coming. And our third speaker, Professor Insinyur Dr. Siti Hawa Hamzah. She's a retired professor in civil and structural engineering. Tapi nampak muda. Okay, from Faculty of Civil Engineering, UITM, Shah Alam. Currently, Insinyur Dr. Siti Hawa is the Director of the Engineering Accreditation Department, EAD, and Engineering Technology Accreditation Department, ETAD, of the Board of Engineers Malaysia. Welcome, Prof. Siti. Last but not least, Dr. Verinder Singh. He's the President of the Malaysian Institute of Certified Public Accountants, MICPA, and also a council member of the Malaysian Institute of Accountants, MIA. He's also a non-executive chairman of the Tricor Groups Malaysia subsidiary, the Tricor Services Malaysia Sundian Berhad. Welcome, Dr. Verinder. Thank you very much for joining us today at this, again, unprecedented occasion, because we are not so used, I don't know, at least myself, I'm not so used to webinar. You always have a seminar, forum, face-to-face. It's a learning experience for everyone of us, especially those who have served over 20 years. This is a new normal for us, definitely. So ladies and gentlemen, as we know, the big difference between face-to-face and online course lies in how students interact between them and also between us, the facilitator, the instructors. And to be successful in an online environment requires learners to be more self-directed and also more responsible, take charge of their own learning in order to be more successful. Well, however, not all students have this predisposition for self-directed learning under the emergency remote teaching that we are experiencing right now. And online learning may not be ideal for everyone, in fact. So because of that, we need to discuss today. So I would like to go to my first question here. Since quality assurance is about ensuring the academic programs that can develop graduates to meet the intended standard, how can we ensure that with ERT, this thing can happen? That we can ensure that quality assurance is not compromised, and especially considering this challenging time, are the QA or accrediting bodies willing to relax some criteria, some requirements? Well, especially for the graduating cohort, because we know that some of them, most of them are doing internship right now. Some can continue working from home, but some has to defer. So there might be some repercussion for their future employability, etc., etc., etc. So perhaps we can start with the boss in the country, MQA, the regulatory body that can always ensure quality in higher education in the country. Prof. Khairul, please.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Sna. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning, panelists and also audience. So today, I think we have already issued a guideline dated back in late March 2020 that for this particular pandemic or COVID or PKP or MCO in English, for the institutions to take note and to use as a guide, as mentioned by Prof. Rosna during this ERT, okay, emergency remote teaching, so that the institutions can alter or modify the teaching and learning process to ensure that the continuity can still be carried out, but with, of course, some relaxation in terms of the standards. So in particular, I think, as mentioned by Prof. Rosna as well, in particular, I think when it comes to industrial training, so I think many of the companies have to shut down during the MCO, the first phase of MCO. So majority of the students who are already in the industry have to go home or have to, being laid off by these companies, or they have to work from home. So we have already come in the guideline itself, it mentions something about the possibility of that industry training component to be done at home if the company can accept that, or it can be also converted into something of a project-based or a different course as well. But as long as there is still some industrial input and also supervision by the industry. So I think that is one thing. And then for the, because as mentioned by Prof. Rosna, the students especially, they did not sign up for, majority of them, they did not sign up for this remote or online teaching or teaching and learning. So as you correctly mentioned, not everyone is familiar and comfortable with this kind of approach. And as part of the institutions themselves. So of course we have more and more institutions coming into blended learning. So, but that's still, partially face-to-face and partially through online and remote learning. So when this has to be 100% remote or online learning, so there are challenges, definitely. And I think for the institutions, they have to ensure that the students are well kept in the in the process of developing all these procedures to ensure that the quality of the teaching and learning is not jeopardized. So we are in the view that because in Malaysia we have the framework, Malaysian Qualification Framework, and we have the second edition, which is currently being in full force since I think last month. So the main gist of this is to embrace outcome-based education. So we are talking about the outcomes. As far as we are concerned, as long as the outcomes of the students are guaranteed, so that they can, number one is for them to be employed. So I think the most important thing is so that the students are employable and they can seek for jobs or become job creators themselves. So that is the part we feel that although we do relax some of the, some relaxations are being considered and being given to the institutions, but they have to ensure that the outcomes of the students are not jeopardized. So I think that is the main part. When we say about the graduating cohort, of course, the consideration of the graduating cohorts in terms of when face-to-face can resume back as normal. So these cohort graduating students in the final semesters and so on, they need to be given the priority to come back to campus first so that they can do the necessary face-to-face practical, clinical, and other related teaching and learning processes that requires face-to-face approach. So I think the government is also considering flexibility in terms of the number, maybe in terms of percentage. It might not be big. It might be about 20 to 30% of the population can go back to campus at one time. So I think the PPT, the IHL, the institutions of higher learning have to plan strategically so that these students will be given the opportunity first, and then to the other batch or cohorts of students who requires face-to-face learning and hands-on approach and so on. So I think that also means that the institutions will be given the autonomy. Okay, so I think what is the most important thing that I want to highlight is the institutions are given the autonomy to decide based on the guidelines that we have produced. And it's up to the internal quality assurance unit or department, IQA, to actually ensure and strengthen the IQA and the CQI systems so that the role of the quality management can take place and institutions can ensure that the quality of the teaching and learning through this ERT can still be achieved. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Khairul. So you're suggesting that there could be partial movement back to campus, staggering?
I think the Ministry of Higher Education is working on that, Prof. Rosna,
Okay.
to allow students to come back to campus, but we do not know exactly when can this happen.
Meaning that you're suggesting that the IQA of the university should be strengthening their strategic direction, anticipating this movement, perhaps?
Yeah, I think majority of the institutions have already done that. They already have a plan.
Yeah.
I think some of the institutions even have more than one plan, a backup plan, and maybe another backup plan, because there's no certain dates being released yet at the moment. But we're looking at, of course, within this year itself. But again, in MQA as well, we are actually now working on a different set of guidelines to assist the institutions in the next series of the current MCO, which is now a bit to the first phase. So we are developing that, and that document is also being considered. Things being considered in the document includes industrial training as well, but we need to look at the specific program standards that we have in MQA, because not all programs can be treated the same. Some programs require face-to-face physical intervention. For example, we have early childhood. Those kind of programs do need that kind of face-to-face physical practicum. They cannot be, replaced by something else. But there are certain programs that we are looking at currently, and we are dealing and we are discussing with the experts, the subject matter experts, for them to give advice to us on whether the relaxation on the part for practical can be considered or not, even for this year, or maybe even as far as maybe somewhere into next year as well.
Thank you, Prof. Khairul. Definitely, this pandemic has pushed us further to consider the alternative mode of learning. It's a good start, I think. So let us hear from the professional bodies. We have heard from the CEO, acting CEO of MQA. So maybe we move to Professor Syed Ahmad Iskandar from the architectural perspective point of view. Prof?
Okay, thank you, Prof. Rosna. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Salam sejahtera Malaysia and all viewers out there. Thank you for inviting me on behalf of MAPS Malaysia. Let me share with you a bit about architectural education. It takes a minimum total of 7 years for formal architecture education and plus training. A minimum of 7 for one to become an architect. 5-year formal academic education, and another 2 supervised working experience. So it would be inconceivable if we say that the issue and challenges due to pandemic COVID-19 can disrupt the whole stretch of education journey of that 7 years. So we have to look at it within that context. So the board believes that the architectural and interior design program that we have in this country have the resilience to face these challenges. We never imply that relaxing some of the provisions or some of the standards implying or would lead to lowering of the standards. It's just different ways of doing things, but not lowering the standard. So education providers are aware that they have to meet the minimum standards. They will strive their best to meet that minimum standard. We know for the fact that all these graduates will later enter into the building industries, and they have to play a serious role in ensuring public health and safety in many of the spaces places and buildings that they involve with. I would like to take the audience into the core courses of the architectural and interior design education, which is Design Studio. We basically divide the content of the curriculum into two: design courses and non-design courses. The one that Board of Architects concerned most is the design courses. So Design Studio is basically about 6 to 8 credit per semester, ranging from different education providers. And it's about 35% to 40% of the entire curriculum content. And Design Studio is something integrative, incremental, progressive. We have a Design Studio from the first semester of first year, and the same credit being allocated in the second semester is continue progressively straight to the final year. And it's the main thrust of that. So if we want to compromise or relax, we would do relaxation on the non-design courses first. And we try our best to protect design courses because this is the things or the element that makes an architect. Another aspect that is also important in the standards is for the student to keep their portfolio of individual design learning experience. And this portfolio is compiled and completed in a chronological manner, and students being given the time to continuously improve the portfolio, meaning what you do poorly previously in the previous semester can be refined and improved further in the subsequent semester. So it's not, the learning is not semesterly, but the learning is always in continuum, in progress throughout the stretch of the educational journey. I think that is very important. So that we may be suffering a bit now, but we have the opportunity to upgrade or to improve that in the subsequent semester. And we hope that an education provider will take that steps. And we have included this in the special notes. We released 3 special notes. The first one was exactly on the date of the first MCO, 18 March. Talking about your concern in your questions about graduating cohort, what we can say is that we treat them in the usual way. Assessment will be conducted as set by the minimum standard. It must be done by a minimum of 2% and must be done collectively. So it has to be done thoroughly. Of course, they are graduating cohort. We would be very concerned if we release graduates that we are not confident of. I think that is from me, Prof. Rosna as a start.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Said. Well, we protect the core courses to ensure that those are the courses that make what architects are, right? Okay, we move next to Dr. Siti Hawa from Board of Engineers.
Okay.
Silakan,
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Rosna, for having me here, and also to all the panelists. Thank you for being with us, and to all the viewers out there. We hope to share some light at the end of the tunnel of this pandemic situation that has actually surfaced recently. With respect to the Board of Engineers Malaysia, I think we go along with what MQ had done, where at the end of March, on the 31st of March, we came out with our guiding principles on teaching and learning and assessment. And we focus the implementation of TNL and assessment to 5 main areas, which is the final year project, which is definitely affecting the graduating cohort. and then the industrial training, which may affect the technologies and the technician program. And the laboratory session is just the ongoing cohort. And the IDP and also the design project will also affect the graduating cohort. And last but not least is the, we have the final exam. So final exam would affect all of those students on board. Now, in this particular guiding principle, we have given the flexibility to the university to handle all the alternative assessments that they can come out with. And with whatever alternative assessment that they are going to embark on, we expect them not to compromise on the accreditation standard. As what the Board of Architects is also looking at, we will not compromise on the standard. Reason being because Board of Engineers Malaysia is one of the full signatory member to the International Engineering Alliance. So for the Washington Accord, we are one of the 20 member. We have 20 member countries for Washington Accord. And then we have 11 for Sydney Accord and 9 for Dublin Accord. So we could not lower our standard in the sense that we do not want our standard to be compromised at any level because we are to benchmark with the IEA, International Engineering Alliance at the world body. And we are going to have even our upcoming meeting, which is due for South Africa, but then because of this COVID, we are going to have it online. And we are currently discussing on issues on how to maintain the quality assurance and how to maintain the accreditation and also how to make review visits virtually. So these matters has been discussed right now pre the meeting because we have the meeting at the end of June. So the base camp is currently being held now. So in view of this particular situation in Malaysia, we have actually elaborated some of the functions of how FYP can be done, how LIT can be done, and laboratory, and also the IDP, the design project, also the final exam. We have actually started basically few trainings online. Yesterday, I conducted one training with UNIMAS, and we are addressing on how we should be looking at how the final exam can be done. And obviously, the infrastructure is not really that good in many places, especially when you talk about to have an online final exam within a period of maybe 3 hours. So there have to be some relaxation to be done, to be given to these particular sets of students who are actually experiencing the poor infrastructure issues. Those are issues that need to be handled by the university. As for the accrediting body, what we are going to look at is how do you go through with the internal quality assurance, your QMS, and how is it being approved by the internal body. So most importantly is we are looking at the outcome that is attained by the students, by the graduates upon graduation. I think I will share this much at this point of time. Thank you, Prof. Rosna.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Siti. It seems that both Board of Engineers and also Board of Architects have put in place some alternative measures in terms of assessment. Yeah, right, Prof. Siti?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. Meaning that even it will not sort of distort the plan of the graduating cohort?
You should not. Yes.
Should not. Okay. Okay, we have heard from two technical panelists here. So we would like to move to the next panelist from MIA, Dr. Virendrajit.
Yes, here, Prof. Now,
any lab, right?
Yeah. So let me, because as a council member of the Malaysian Institute of Accountants, we are the accrediting body for all the local degrees in accounting that we have in Malaysia. there has been a recent request for relaxation, and I think we have, in many respects, followed the MQA guidelines. And so when some of the universities came to the MIA for relaxation, we have no particular issues, because the relaxation is really in terms of flexibility in the mode of learning and flexibility in the way assessments are done, right? So moving from face-to-face to online. So we, in the MIA, are agreeable to allow flexibilities, and very similar to what the other professions and engineering and in some ways architecture in the sector is doing, is that the universities are given the flexibility to do this, but quality cannot be compromised. So it's the universities which then have to come up with the relevant plan. And if they need more guidance or more assurance, then go back to the Malaysian Institute of Accountants to sort of share with us what they're doing. So we are open to flexibility, online assessments. So when you prepare for online assessment, the issues are always about moderation, quality control. So what are the various checks and balances that we have in terms of managing that? Again, we've passed it on to the universities to ensure that the quality of online assessment is in line with the learning outcomes and the program objectives for that particular program and subjects and that are being taught. The issue really is about the graduates being able to then demonstrate the competencies that are required by the professional bodies. So I think, from my point of view, from the accountancy profession, online teaching is not a problem. It is perhaps the assessment in terms of exams and so on, how you're going to manage that. Again, in theory, most professional bodies around the world, including the body which I am president, the MICPA, are moving to online examinations. So basically that's because of distance. And then you need to have technology which has got the relevant controls. So I think what we are finding because of the pandemic is that different universities, different institutions have different levels of capability. And so the issue is, how do you streamline that? And the same thing is happening in schools and so on and so forth. So that, I think, tells us that despite the fact that we talk about the internet age and how the government is spending a lot on internet facilities, we find that remote areas still have a problem, right? So I think that's the issue where students may face in terms of online learning. So again, the ball is in the court of the universities to try to resolve this in a reasonable manner. So we, in the profession, allow the flexibility, and connected with that, you see, we followed the MQA guidelines, so we are totally in line with the MQA guidelines. So the few universities that did write to us, to the education board of the Malaysian Institute of Accountants, we have responded, and we have actually shared it with all universities, that all those universities that are accredited with MIA are allowed to adopt online assessments. And as long as your university senate and relevant academic boards have approved it, then share it with us, the final outcome, and we will take it on board. So I think in that sense, we are on board, on par with the other professions as well. The other aspect, maybe we'll cover it later, is this issue of your internship, the practical and the industrial training. I'm not sure whether we'll cover that subsequently. I suppose there's another question on that. But I think on a broad basis, that's how the accountancy profession is on board, and we are prepared to work with all the relevant institutions and how best to follow that. And really, the MQA is a leader in this in terms of setting the guidelines. And then the professions then come on board to see whether they agree and follow and give leeway to the universities. So the Malaysian Institute of Accountants is totally on board with giving leeway to the universities, but we then need to be consulted in terms of, or share with us how you're going through with all these online assessments and so on and so forth, to ensure quality is not compromised. So the fundamental point is always about quality, no compromising on the quality and so on. So I think that perhaps gives very briefly the position of the Malaysian Institute of Accountants.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Verinda. Well, earlier on, Dr. Siti mentioned that BEM, Board of Engineers Malaysia, did some sort of training support to university when it comes to alternative assessment. Is there any initiative by MIA to reach out to the institution to facilitate with the assessment?
I think what we have done is that the first step was the universities asking, first of all, for the flexibility. So the flexibility the Education Board has allowed, but we've left it with the university to then perhaps come back to us if you need to have more guidance. And so far, I think our education department is liaising with the universities. We've had no particular issues that they have raised yet. So to us, it's about MQA guidelines. Universities are able to follow. We are in line with it. So no particular initiative, because accountancy is obviously possible to do online teaching. Even online assessment is possible. It's just checks and balances and controls that you need to put in place when you do these online assessments. And technology is not an easy thing, as we are finding out as well. There's so many tools, but where are all the sufficient checks and balances in terms of accessibility, user access? Who is able to, for example, if you're looking at online assessments, there's hacking and so on. How do you control all that? So that's an area that really is left to the universities to manage. So we haven't initiated anything other than that. And really, we are open to the universities suggesting any other opportunities.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Verinda. Any comments from perhaps MQA? Prof. Khairul, you want to add more to the first issues that we discussed?
Yeah, thank you. I
Your
think
name is mentioned oftentimes.
Yeah, as rightly mentioned by all the panelists from the professional bodies, I think the most important thing is we are not compromising the quality. We do relaxation on some of the quality assurance requirements, but quality itself. So I think that is the most important that I think we need to highlight. That no compromise on the quality, so that the students' future is not jeopardized. Because I think it's important for them to be skillful and meet the necessary requirements of the industry when they graduate.
Do you think our higher institution is ready to go through this?
I think, as I said earlier, that we give the autonomy to the institutions. So I think the institutions have to take up this part on ensuring the quality. And before that, of course, they need to plan. You need to make necessary decisions and the necessary SOPs, for example. So if let's plan ahead in case the students are allowed to go back into campus, for example, for the labs, for the the practical part. But of course, it will not be as the previous normal. It will be based on the new normal. So I think all the institutions have to plan from now on, so that they are not left behind. And I can see that some of the institutions have already published their plans on Facebook and in the website and so on, so that the students are well informed beforehand. So I think it's very important to engage the students, because they are the main beneficiaries of all this. So again, they need to talk to the students, because when we do remote and online teaching, not everyone is accustomed to it. So then we need to do a lot of formative assessment on top of the summative. Of course, summative is important, but formative assessments are also important in this online or remote ERP, because the lecturers will be able to gauge the understanding level of the students, the way the pedagogy of the the online teaching, whether it suits the majority of the students or not. So the lecturers and the students can work together hand in hand in improvising the way the learning takes place. I think that is important. thing that everyone has to consider.
Yeah, eventually it goes back to the program owners and faculty members to ensure that quality learning is taking place. I think that is pretty clear message from all the panelists this morning. Any other comment from panelists before we move to the second round?
Okay, I would like to add, Prof. Rosna,
Yes, Prof.
after we release 3 special notes, then we conduct a session, live session with all the education providers, basically head of school, head of department, or head of programs. We want to hear from them their feedbacks. How are they getting on with the new normal? We did not receive any reports of problems or difficulties. Of course, there are challenges, but they are learning to overcome it slowly and surely. I have the confidence that School of Architecture in Malaysia, from all architecture education provider, can cope well with the challenges and the situation.
That's very positive. Okay, we hope so, because nothing can stop us. Like what you mentioned earlier, we are resilient over this crisis. We should be able to overcome, but with proper planning.